Hi, Gene here with today's thought, and today we're going to be talking about a word that this administration apparently has no knowledge of. And just to be fair, not just this administration, but the administration before that and the administration before that, going all the way back to World War II. World War II was the last war, believe it or not. You think of all the wars we've been in since then, either actively fighting or supporting an ally. And World War II is the last war in which we won a clear-cut victory. What is victory? It's either destroying the enemy so completely that they don't exist anymore, or destroying so much of the enemy that they lose the will to fight and they surrender. That's victory. If you don't have one of those two things, then you don't have victory. And we have not had that since World War II. Now, the war right after World War II, the Korean War. This is when this all started. And the war was very much in doubt who would win beginning the war. But General MacArthur, turned the tables, and they could have won. It was MacArthur who said, by the way, if I recall correctly, famously, that there is no substitute for victory. But the Truman administration, for whatever reason, we're not going to go through history, I'm not going to do a long analysis, but they stopped short of victory. They apparently afraid of China, and I don't know why. At that time we had nuclear weapons, China did not. And well, that actually was one, if I recall correctly, one of the factors that ended the Korean War was a threat, I think it was from MacArthur, you can check me on this, I don't have a history book, so please correct me in the comments if I'm remembering wrong. But somebody, and I believe it was MacArthur, threatened to use a nuclear weapon if China did not end its support of North Korea. But we should have demanded China withdraw, in my opinion, and forced to surrender. North Korea could not have won without the support of China. And actually, as I said, the tables had been turned. MacArthur, Incheon, was a very famous battle. This was MacArthur's. There was a cliff. Kind of think of the boys of Pontefract in Normandy, when our soldiers scaled the wall. This was similar. This was a steep cliff that was thought to be a natural barrier that our soldiers could not surmount. Well, we did. That was what MacArthur did. He turned the tide of the war, and but we did not win. And he said there is no substitute for victory. And we go on in every war. I'm not going to go. I've already spoken enough about one war. I'm not going to analyze each war, but we have forgotten the idea of pursuing victory. I'm going to be talking about two countries today where supposedly we are allies, with whom we are allied, Israel and Ukraine. And what is the first, now you don't have to go to a war college, you don't have to go to West Point to miss this obvious point, is what is one of the first things that you want to do? We'll say the second thing that you want to do, but very important, second most important thing that you want to do in any war. Number one, this is a war if you are, I'm assuming you are attacked, that we're the good guys, which we always are, and our allies. So assume that one country invades one of our allies. The first goal of the defender, our ally, is to stop the attack, to stop the attack in its tracks, turn it back towards the enemy. In other words, defense. And which is, to be fair, our America for Ukraine and Israel, we are doing that. We are supporting them in that first step. You've heard it over and over again. Israel has a right to defend itself. Ukraine has a right to defend itself. And in the case of Israel, we've not just provided weapons, but we've also we sent aircraft carriers. We sent ships into the area to threaten Iran. that's a whole other thought that I could talk about Iran, and perhaps I will in a future vlog. But for now, they support that first step, but they don't support the second step. And what is the second step? The second step, as an Israeli, either a foreign minister or a general, a retired general, it doesn't matter who exactly said it, an Israeli made the very odd, what should be an obvious point, that as soon as possible you want to fight the war in the enemy's territory. You don't want to be sitting and absorbing blows in your own territory, which is, to their credit, that's what the Ukrainians did. They invaded Russia, so they're at least fighting part of the war in Russia. And that's what you want to do. And in Israel, they attacked, now for the first time, they got intelligence, which, well, you compare the 67 war and the 73 war, the 1967 war, the Six-Day War. The Israelis could see that the Arab countries surrounding them were preparing to attack. So they attacked first, and especially in the case of Egypt, destroyed all their aircraft, all their fighter jets on the ground before they could even take off. And now we have a parallel just recently when the Hezbollah was going to launch thousands of missiles at Israel, and Israel struck first and eliminated the launching pads or the launching sites for thousands of missiles. Now they were still able to launch a few hundred, I think 300, something like that, a little over 300. The Israelis stopped most of them, and the damage was nothing compared to what Israel would have suffered had Hezbollah succeeded in launching, I think, well, the estimate was 3,000 to 6,000. So let's just say even just 3,000. The Israelis struck first, and if I can make a little aside here, because this is a point that people miss, Hezbollah supposedly is reputed to have 150,000 rockets and missiles of various types. But what matters is not, it matters the number of missiles, but also what matters is the number of launchers, because there is no way that Hezbollah could launch 150,000 rockets at once. I think the estimate is 1,000 or 2,000 per day. Obviously, they only got 300 out because Israel attacked first. And the Israelis are not talking now that if there's no diplomatic solution, the Israelis will re-invade. They had before in the 80s, had 1982, I believe, invaded Lebanon and carved out a security zone. So any fighting that would go on would happen in Lebanon. Now, and there were no missiles. Hezbollah didn't have all these missiles and rockets because the Israelis were there. But this was, well, it's no coincidence. It was a left-wing administration came to power, and that Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, I believe it was, he took the troops out of Lebanon, and that allowed Hezbollah to build up and to build their, it was in the year 2000 they took them out, and in 2006 we had that first Lebanon war. So you see the wisdom, it's just common sense. If you want to fight in Lebanon, in case of Lebanon, and the Israelis have made clear that if there is no diplomatic solution, they're going to have to deal with rockets coming in, but they are going to go right into Lebanon, and at least on the ground, they are going to fight there. They are not going to wait for Lebanon, for Hezbollah. Well, that's essentially Lebanon these days. Hezbollah owns, or Iran owns Lebanon through Hezbollah. But they're not going to just sit there. It's not to say that some soldiers wouldn't get through, but they're not going to sit there and wait for Hezbollah to launch a land invasion into Israel. They are going to strike first, and I'm sure they know where all these other launchers are, and then they have the problem that some of them are in civilian areas, but they cannot, well, of course the international community, because it's a Jewish state, the only Jewish state, they're going to come down like a ton of bricks on Israel for taking out some of these launchers that are in civilian areas. But Israel has a right I've read the Geneva Convention. They have a right a combatant has the right to pursue an enemy wherever the enemy is, and it's the people on the other side, the combatants on the other side, who have the sole 100% responsibility of distinguishing themselves, separating themselves from the civilians, which is why Israel, being a civilized country, like every civilized country, has military bases that are clearly demarked and away from the civilians as much as possible in a small country like Israel. But that's what a civilized country does. Now, Hezbollah and Hamas, they deliberately, and I bet Iran even doesn't have their military sites in the middle of Tehran, and they don't have rocket launchers in the middle of Tehran. I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have heard nothing about that. So you want to invade the other country's territory, and same thing with Ukraine, except we're talking about Russia, and they finally invaded Russia. But also, and this is the point I want to get, that this administration opposes that second step. They do not, in the case of Israel, you hear over and over again talking to Iran and trying to prevent a regional. There already is a regional war. If you're Israeli, you're being attacked from seven different nations, either states or organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas. So, there's Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There's so many of these who can keep track. But the point is that Israel, you hear over and over, Israel and Ukraine in Ukraine's case, they want to be able to fire missiles deeper into Russia to get the military bases, where the way the situation is right now, Ukraine can only, and before they couldn't launch missiles and rockets into Russia at all, which is why, by the way, finally they're getting some sense, and the Ukrainians are building their own drones so they can use them wherever they want to. But all the Russians have to do is just pull their forces, keep their bases, their ammo dumps, etc. Most of them, their airfields, their planes, out of range of beyond the range to which the Ukraine is allowed to use the missiles that they get from us. And perhaps maybe Germany and England, maybe whoever else is providing missiles, maybe they have the same restriction. So it would be nice if the Israelis, if they were not at war themselves, could provide all the missiles without restrictions. But you hear over and over again, Israel has a right to defend itself. What you never hear is Israel has a right to invade the territories of those who launched a war against them, a war that they started, and force either the total destruction or the surrender, ideally unconditional, of the enemy. Now, I'll end on this. What I would like to see is defeating, say in the case of Hamas, that's the Hamas, and I'll have a thought on Hamas actually in a second if I have so I won't end on this, if I can remember long enough. But in the case of Hamas, I would say they must, on television, broadcasts of the whole world, walk onto the floor of the Knesset in Jerusalem, Israel, and sign a document of unconditional surrender so that there is no doubt that they lost, and they know they lost, and everybody knows that they lost. Because this is the problem that Israel has. The way it's working in the Middle East, if they don't destroy Hamas completely, if there's only one member of Hamas left, and he can say, well, we survived. Israel could not wipe us out. We survived. We won. Never mind all the destruction around them. And that's what I want to talk about right now, just quickly, and give you a little news here, because you remember that our administration and other members of the international community were telling Israel, don't go, just practically ordering them, don't go into Rafah, millions will be killed and you won't achieve anything. Well, as we all know, and that it would take months to evacuate all the people. Of course, they did it in, I think it was something like 3 weeks, evacuated everybody. But it was just reported today that Israel has now destroyed 80% of the tunnels in Rafah, which was the main way they were, Hamas was smuggling weapons in from Egypt through the Philadelphia corridor, which some members of the international community are crazy enough to think that, or naive enough to think that Israel would ever give up. And in fact, the Israelis, if you've seen pictures, it's a dirt road, but now they're paving it over with asphalt to make it easier to detect, number one, IEDs, improvised explosive devices, and also it would also make it easier for Israel to move from one location to another, to thwart any attempt to infiltrate materiel or fighters from Sinai into Gaza, or by the also you can say, or to smuggle hostages out of Gaza into Egypt. So they are making, and I'm trying to remember, either they destroyed, so I could be wrong, I'm not going to look it up, because it's good news either way. The Israelis announced that they either have destroyed the last Hamas battalion in Rafah, or they have destroyed all of them except one. I believe they said that they destroyed all of them, but if not, they had 24 to start with. So I'll end for now. That's it. I hope if I get my wish and Trump wins, I know he will let them. He will let the Israelis and the Ukrainians. Well, Ukrainians will probably try to force a negotiated solution. And I understand the way he would do it is tell the Russians, either you negotiate, sit down, negotiate seriously, or the United States, we will give Ukraine all the weapons they need, and without any restriction on how and where they can be used. And hopefully that would, in other words, read the riot act to Putin and hope he has good sense. But who knows? I'm not a prognosticator. I don't have a crystal ball. But I guess that's enough for today. Thanks for stopping by. I did have one more thing I wanted to mention, but I forgot what it was. That's what happens when you get older. So, and if you don't have written notes. So that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Comments always welcome below the video. And if you could share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it, that would be great. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye. Wouldn't you know it, as soon as I shut off the video, I remembered the other point I wanted to make, which is about Trump's saying that he does not want to involve America in forever wars. Well, one way to prevent a forever war is that if an ally gets in a war, give them everything they need to win quickly. That's the reason this war in Ukraine has gone on for so long, is because we've been dribbling, we and the international community have been dribbling in the aid and putting restrictions on it, and then gradually allowing more aid or giving more aid and allowing more freedom of how to use the weapons. So it drags on, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russian soldiers, by the way, Russians are getting killed who may not be if the Ukrainians had been given all the tools that they need to win quickly, or to force a negotiated solution quickly, or at least more quickly. And that's my thought for today for sure. Thanks again for stopping by.